to Be Home Resources, a place you can depend on for all your home ownership needs. My name is Kathleen Goneau, and I'm your real estate concierge. And I'm excited to share with you how to maintain, update, and protect your investment daily. Today's topic is one that we all want to know about, and that is about how to keep your basement dry, especially in New England. My guest today is Michael Copperwhite, and he is a basement consultant with DryZone Basement Systems. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate the invite.
I love this topic because I can't even tell you there isn't a day that goes by that someone is talking to me about water in their basement, whether it's somebody we've sold a house to or somebody that is thinking about selling. And wet basements in New England can be a challenging subject. And I know that your company is a great one because I've been in business 30 years and I still have a book on my shelf with basement solutions.
Dry basement science.
Dry basement science, yeah.
Book.
And I reference that book all the time with buyers and sellers that are in my office. So you guys are great at educating the industry with all of your knowledge. So thank you for joining today.
It's my pleasure. It's really what we try to do is educate people. I find an educated homeowner if they have an idea of what we're going to do, they kind of get it. And so that's a book we actually send out in a pre-mailer so people can get that before we even meet them.
It is an awesome book. For anything else, it's so worth it. And you guys are great. So how do I know if my basement needs waterproofing? What are some of the phone calls that you get?
It's the infamous puddle on the floor or 6 inches of water in the basement. And you know, I am in 8 to 10 basements every single week visiting frustrated homeowners, and it kind of comes down to whatever their level of frustration is.
Right.
So I've been in places where literally I'm walking to a foot of water, and others are like, there's a little puddling on this wall, but it's enough of a frustration for them to call us.
Yeah.
So if there's water in the basement, that's usually why they're calling.
Yeah, and the weather changes and all of the things that have been happening with our the weather systems, you're probably busier more than you were earlier in the year, my guess.
Yeah, we're kind of busy year round because it has to do when people are frustrated enough when they decide to call us and pull the trigger.
Right.
So it might be because of a flood, but might be because they know one's coming. But generally this time of year, you usually have a 2-foot snowbank that's melting and frozen ground and rainstorms, and this is usually when basements get really tested.
What are some of the things that actually cause water in a basement?
That's a great question. It really comes down to 99% of all the water coming into a basement is coming under the wall and onto the floor. And it's a symptom of how the foundation's built. You know, your modern 3-piece construction of a foundation, whether it's a concrete block wall or a poured concrete wall, is part of the problem. You know, they dug this big, deep hole initially, and the first thing they poured in the ground were these footings, which is these big blocks that the whole house sits on. And when that dried, they came back and poured walls on top of the footings. And by code, an 8-inch wall is going to sit in a 16-inch footing. And then, of course, the floor goes in, and then they backfill that hole.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem, because if you go into your yard 30 feet, you have soil that's been compressed literally for thousands of years. And then you have a 10-foot backfill around the foundation that's a sponge compared to that.
So as a property ages, the topography can change, and that can, a basement that doesn't have water could potentially have water.
So water seeks the path of least resistance, we know that. And I was in a house just yesterday, it was a 1950s ranch, and I was explaining when they put this backfill, they can't compress that fill as much as they can. The soil has been compressed for thousands of years, and it rains for 70 years. And all that backfill gets oversaturated. Water weighs 9 pounds a gallon, and it just works its way down, and then under the wall and onto the floor.
So it's not uncommon, especially in New England, with the way our weather patterns,
no, it's not
that
uncommon
there's
at all.
water in basements.
You have a dry basement, consider yourself blessed.
Yeah, and we see, a lot of buyers will say, I don't want to look at a house with a sump pump. And I kind of chuckle because I'm like, well, what would be the alternative if the basement needs a sump pump?
Exactly.
You know? So what are some of the methods that you use? What would be some of the solutions for water?
So you just mentioned sump pumps. So a sump pump's an important part of keeping a basement dry. In most cases, because of that saturated backfill, that pressure is on every wall around the entire basement. And so you might have one wall leaking or 2 walls leaking, but it's unfortunately a matter of time before that continues. We don't know if the future is going to hold, but what we'll do is open up the floor and put a perimeter drain system down on the inside. On the footing. So that floor is 3 to 5 inches thick, and it's sitting on that footing. and we'll open the floor, put our drain on top of the footing, and that way it's not down in the mud zone where it's going to get clogged. It's on top of the footing, and we actually concrete over our drain system when we're done, and we send that to a sump pump, which is going to push the water out through its pumping system out of the house.
And then where does it go?
Well, then we're getting out of the house, and we're pitched, and we're going to bury a line, and we're usually going 15 feet minimum. I was with a customer recently. We did a 45-foot underground run just to get the water out to their garden. Yeah. But it's underground and invisible, and the further away from the foundation, the better, to avoid that saturated backfill. I was in a house just recently, and they had a sump pump going out and dumping the water 6 inches from the house, and it went to just
it's going
recycling over and over again.
Yeah. I also know that foliage and trees too. I've had people call, not have any water in their basement, but had previously the year before cut down a bunch of trees.
Right, and I hear that a lot. They pull all the hedges out, and all of a sudden they have water
and now they have water because those hedges were helping.
Drink a lot of water.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so whenever we change something on our property, it can cause, whether you're adding a patio or.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of the sump pump, that's an important part. We have a couple different ones, but one of the most popular parts of our sump pump is a battery backup. So that in the event of, we're both laughing. I have my own story about this, but in the event of a power loss or a circuit breaker tripping, this sump pump is still going to work and still push water out.
Yeah,
and interestingly enough, we usually need water being pushed out of the house through a sump pump when it's storming and raining, and often we are losing power. So that's,
and that quick thaw.
It's another level of peace of mind for our customers. I really believe that no matter what a customer does with us, really what they're purchasing is peace of mind.
So what are the most common mistakes because sump pumps is an area that I do see a lot of people try to do it themselves. What are some of those mistakes they make when they're installing?
If they're doing their own? So I see
it all the time.
I see a few problems. One of them is they're not deep enough.
Right.
So I was in one just 2 weeks ago, and there was just a pump sitting in the mud that was maybe 6 inches below the floor. And so the important part of that is our basins are 21 inches deep. And so you've got a sump that's flush with the basin's flush with the floor, and then 21 inches deep, perforated, so it's going to grab a lot of groundwater. The other one is not having an airtight lid on it, because
I see that all the time.
Me too. The concern there, so we're talking about waterproof, and there's two concerns in the basement: water and moisture. Water is the bigger concern because people can see it and it ruins things. But moisture is always coming through the walls and through the floor, which is why people run dehumidifiers. And so an open pit of just water, whether the pump is working or not, is just more moisture into the basement. And moisture is the enemy in a basement. Mold grows from that, and can be terrible.
It causes a lot of environmental issues. So I have a couple of questions floating in my head that I know that the viewers are thinking, being a former antique owner, the fieldstone basements, how do you manage those?
I live in one of those, actually.
I'm sure,
And there are a lot of them in New England. So the same process applies. We can do a perimeter drain system. It's called WaterGuard. It's a product we manufacture on a stone wall, no problem. And stone wall doesn't have a footing, but we're still putting our drain in the floor zone versus the mud zone and concreting over it.
Right, different, and same with slab. So how about a slab ranch?
If it's got a slab and they got water coming onto the wall, onto the floor, same thing applies.
And that's even worse because there's no basement there. And what are some of the things that could affect or impact a basement that has been waterproofed?
Well, if it's done by us, they're going to be dry.
That's good.
And quite frankly, I talk to lots of people who are looking to finish the basement space, especially a ranch. You got a ranch house, the basement space, if you can use it, you're doubling your square footage. And so I talk to lots of people who say, we're about to spend a lot of money finishing this space. And we're doing systems because they've had water, and they go, I'm not comfortable spending that kind of money until we know it's going to be dry. So if we do that full perimeter, which is most commonly what we do, that comes to the homeowner with a dry basement warranty from us that says you're going to have a dry basement for the life of the structure.
Oh, so cool. So as a realtor, that's great, because then I know that's something that the homeowner can pass on to the next person and
that's what I
hold
point out to them, because it's not on their ownership, it's on the life of the structure. So if they ever sell the house, that buyer coming in is going to inherit that dry basement warranty, which keeps them in control of the transaction, because now it's not a problem house, wet basement, fixer-upper, nothing. We get calls a lot from people. I got one last week from somebody saying, hey, I'm buying a house with your system in it. Tell me what this is.
What does this mean?
exactly.
What is the value of it?
And they were really concerned, how do we transfer this warranty? I go, it's just a matter of me putting your name on the file, no problem. But I'll come out and meet you at the house. They're closing on the 21st, and walk you through what our system is. And they go, oh, we would love that. So
this is an area that a lot of people will overlook. Whether the basement's finished or not, having a waterproofing system, especially in New England, is so valuable.
This particular house, I had not met the owner yet. She's out of state. She inherited it when her parents passed away. And my first appointment was with the realtor, ironically enough.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. And I'm like, wow. And she says, I have buyers walking away because it's a wet basement. And so we did our thing, and within a month they sold it.
Yeah, just with the same, with the sump pump, there must be something wrong. And many times that the problem has already been addressed.
Yeah, in this case it wasn't, and there was water everywhere in the basement. And you know what, as a realtor, people are not gonna, they're walking
I
away.
just saw somebody spend $25,000 renovating a basement. They had water, they cleaned it up, they thought they fixed the water problem. They redid the basement again. 2 weeks later, same problem.
So getting back to your question about mistakes people can make, I see lots of do-it-yourself waterproofing projects from homeowners, and then I'm only there because they've called us. So now they're frustrated because they've tried to do some things on their own. But like dry lock paint is a do-it-yourself waterproof paint that they can paint on the walls and floor. And there's never
Does that work?
Well, there's never a downside to brightening the space and putting a coat of white paint on the wall. And it might hold some stuff back for some time. The truth is, water always wins.
Yeah.
So moisture in that case is going to push through the wall or through the floor and push that paint off of the wall and floor, and it'll look flaky, and they can scrape it and paint it again and make it look nice, but it's not going to hold back water. Yeah,
I've seen that in particular in fieldstone properties where they'll fill the cracks and then paint over it.
And there's a few other interesting situations that come with fieldstone foundations that other ones don't have, because water can come through the wall.
Right.
And so we have a vapor barrier product that goes down the wall and ties into our drain system.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes fieldstone walls are it's like squirting into the basement, like a hose through the wall.
Like just roll down.
Crazy.
Yeah. So just in summary, water can come up from below, they can come in from the walls, and it really is about looking at the way that it's flowing.
Yeah. And if it's in the basement, we can help.
Yeah. And we talked about waterproofing being guaranteed. That was one of my questions.
Yeah, the warranty.
So I really love the warranty.
Yeah, it's a big one.
So is there any other tips that you might have for our homeowners?
There are a couple of things that they can do on their own before they have to call us. Gutters are always a great idea in a house to move water away from that's that saturated backfill, that 10 feet away from the house, all the way around the house. If you can keep water off of that, you're going to lessen the amount of water in that saturated backfill. So gutters are really important. Grading your landscape or soil up against the house so it's graded away from the house versus towards the house. Basic stuff, but I've literally advised people to do that and never heard from them again. Meaning it solved it. So.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Michael, I've really enjoyed our conversation
thank you.
today.
I appreciate
There's
it.
so much to waterproofing a basement, and it's one of those areas that we really don't like to talk about.
Sometimes we have to.
I know. Well, thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. If you have tip ideas or topics for us or questions about today's show, simply email us on the email address on the screen. We want to earn the right to be your real estate concierge. And I also invite you to join our Facebook group page, which is called Be Home Resources. Again, I'm Kathleen Goneau, and I am signing off for today. Be well and live well.